call this meeting to order.
131 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. Before we begin, I would like to do some little housekeeping and tell you, don't forget the decals in front of you to put any of your devices on so we don't create feedback on the loops. Don't forget to, you are not allowed to take photographs of what's going on here. Don't forget that you can get them afterwards off the website. Don't forget that when you speak, you should address everything through the chair. Once again, don't forget that that I think that's it. That's all the housekeeping I have for you guys. Yes, Kevin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm just wondering, a point of order, that I do see the Deputy Minister is here for the first hour. Is there any chance she could stay for the second hour?
Well, you heard the question, Madam Ondu.
I will make myself available.
Okay. There you go.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Good. Thank you. I wanted to welcome Minister. Welcome. And thank you for taking the time to come and replying so promptly to our requests. So now, we're going to begin with the study, which is Canada's anti-racism strategy, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, May the 30th, 2024. The committee will begin its study of Canada's anti-racism strategy. So I think that you know the usual drill. We have the names of people who are going to ask questions of the minister. The minister is here for the first hour, and accompanying her will be, obviously, the Department of Canadian Heritage, Isabelle Mondeau, Deputy Minister, Gavin Kadot, Assistant Deputy Minister, and Combating Hate, we're going to have Gavin Godot also is going to be the Assistant Deputy Minister who is going to speak to this issue. So, again, Minister, you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we will, of course, open to questions and answers. I will give you a 30-second call. I will just go 30 seconds so you can wrap up if possible, and then we will begin the question and answer period. So welcome, and begin, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues, committee members. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. As you indicated, Madam Chair, I'm joined by my wonderful officials who have also said that they'll be able to stay here later, so thank you. Now, Madam Speaker, when we got elected back in 2015, we started a very important conversation in this country about systemic racism and how we can address the impact that discrimination has on Canadians. We know that 2 in 5 Canadians say that they face discrimination in Canada, and these proportions rise to 50% among Indigenous people and 78% among racialized people. Now, we also know that rise in hate incidents disproportionately affect Indigenous people, Black and racialized people. And at the same time, Jewish and Muslim Canadians are also disproportionately being impacted by the rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Whether it is online or in our streets, hateful words and actions have a devastating impact on our communities and our country. Whether it is places of worship being attacked, communities being divided, or even losing loved ones, we have seen firsthand what hate and racism can do. And when we look at the pain and damage that hate causes, one thing is clear. We cannot allow hate to go unchecked. The cost of inaction is far too great. And as a government, we have been very clear from the very beginning, hate, racism, and discrimination have absolutely no place in Canada. Madam Chair, we can all agree that every single person in Canada has a right to feel safe, regardless of where they're from, who they love, and how they pray. To that end, in the last 6 months, our government has introduced 2 historic measures to address the critical situation our country is facing. In June, we announced Canada's new anti-racism strategy, which is investing over $110 million to fight racism and discrimination, of which $70 million is being invested directly into communities to promote equity and to ensure communities have the resources they need to fight racism and discrimination, and to also break down systemic barriers that face racialized Canadians. Additionally, just 2 weeks ago, we launched Canada's first ever action plan on combating hate. The plan represents an additional $273 million commitment from our government that is going to support 20 different initiatives that will empower communities identify and respond to hate, that is going to support victims and protect survivors, and that is going to build community trust and improve the institutional readiness within our institutions. Combined, these two plans represent a whole-of-government approach that is fundamentally about security and unity. This is about being proactive, this is about safety, and it is about building trust. Just to give an example of the kind of work that we're talking about, earlier this year I was in Halifax, and there I announced the funding of $800,000 for an organization, Amutep Academy, which aims to improve BIPOC representation in STEM by providing after-school tutoring and mentorship for BIPOC youth in Halifax. Madam Chair, I had an opportunity to meet a young man named Joshua, who, because of the mentorship that he received, he's now going to be able to study engineering at Dalhousie University. And he's not the only one. Thanks to the program that we as a government have been funding, working alongside community groups, there are 10 times the number of BIPOC students in STEM at Dalhousie University because of this program. Now, this is just one of the hundreds of different projects that we have been supporting across this country. And let me tell you, they're not just transforming lives, they're transforming and changing communities. As a government, we're stepping up and doing what any responsible government would do, support communities on the ground and continue to fight to keep Canadians safe. But it's also important to remember that there's only one way to combat hate and racism. That is to do it together. That is to do with allies and partners on the ground. It's incumbent upon all of us, Madam Chair, to stand up against hate, racism, and to build a Canada where everyone feels safe. And to reflect on that when we work together, we actually bring people together along. And it's not just the right thing to do, Madam Speaker, it's a Canadian thing to do. That is the vision of Canada that our government is working to build, and I'm happy to take any questions from my colleagues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Now we will begin the question and answer period. The first session is going to be a 6-minute round, and we're going to begin with the Conservatives, Jamel Giovanni. Mr. Giovanni, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Minister said that, just in her opening remarks, that we cannot allow hate to go unchecked. So I'd like to ask the Minister, do you join me in unequivocally condemning the Sammy Dune protests on October 7th in Vancouver, where there were chants of death to Canada, death to America, death to Israel, and even burning of the Canadian flag? Do you unequivocally condemn that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I absolutely condemn such acts of anti-Semitism and acts of hate that we have seen across this country. They need to stop. Full stop. That needs to stop. Madam Speaker, we condemn them in the strongest terms possible. We're working really closely with our colleagues at Public Safety. The local jurisdictions are very much engaged on this issue. And as I mentioned, we have been very proactive at the work that we have been doing. As I mentioned, Madam Chair, through you, we have put forward Canada's first ever action plan on combating hate. This came out of the work that we have been doing with community members, working along stakeholders. This came out of the 2 summits that our government held, whether it was combating anti-Semitism or combating Islamophobia. This came out of the work that my colleague, Minister Ian, has been doing for the action plan for the 2 LGBTQ community. The $275 million that we're putting forward, it's to support communities on the ground, to prevent hate. We're enhancing the Canada Security Program that actually helps communities on the ground to provide support.
Can I ask the Minister, we have seen a sharp rise in hate crimes, various types, over the last 9 years. Some statistics measured at a 251% increase. Why isn't your anti-racism strategy reducing hate crimes as opposed to being inexistent while hate crimes are getting worse?
Madam Chair, I think it's important to recognize that as a government, we have been very deliberate about making a choice to be inclusive. We have been very deliberate about supporting communities, reducing systemic barriers on the ground, by supporting communities on the ground, by making sure with the plan that we have put forward, this is a whole of government approach because we know there's no one single solution to combating hate. We need to work with partners on the ground, whether it is by making sure communities have the supports that they need, but at the same time working alongside StatsCan to make sure we're collecting disaggregated data. Also at the same time ensuring that our institutional readiness is available for our police forces. That's the work that's happening on the ground, the supports for victims and survivors. This is a whole of government approach that we have put forward to support Canadians. And I think it's important to also recognize it's been an extremely difficult time for many Canadians. And as Canadians, we have a responsibility to work alongside communities, to bring people together, to really hone in on the values that I know we're also proud as Canadians of unity, of compassion, and to make sure we're supporting communities on the ground.
Thank you, Minister. So the government's anti-racism strategy claims to make our communities, and I quote from the website, more prosperous. Since 2020, there's been a 134% increase in food bank usage in Ontario. Has your anti-racism strategy failed to make Canadians more prosperous?
Madam Chair, through you, I think it's important to recognize the fact that when we got elected back in 2015, we made a very deliberate choice to be inclusive. You know, I fundamentally believe, and I've said this many times, diversity is a fact in Canada. It exists. But inclusion is a choice. And as a government, as liberal members of this House, we have been very deliberate about making that choice to be inclusive because we know when you remove systemic barriers for Canadians, we all win. We know when you support communities on the ground and empower them. You know, the example that I gave of a young man in Halifax that I met, Joshua, you know, because of the work that's happening on the ground that is enabling and removing barriers, getting people, you know, to get access to the supports that we are providing them, it's the reason why we're seeing amazing results
Minister,
in terms of economic empowerment of Canadians, and we're going to continue to do this work.
Could I ask a clarifying question? So is your strategy to make the food bank lines more diverse and inclusive, or how exactly is the country more prosperous?
I reject the premise of that question, Madam Chair. As I mentioned in my remarks earlier, Canada's anti-racism strategy is to ensure that every single person, regardless of how they look, regardless of how they pray, regardless of who they love, that they have equal opportunities to contribute to the Canadian society and to be able to do it in a successful way so that they can continue to grow. That is a responsible way that we include people. I will always say, when we include people, whether it is in our government, the diversity that exists, whether it is in businesses, whether it is in our institutions, we all win because that's the beauty of Canada, and those are the values that I know that we all agree makes us who we are as
I'm
Canadians.
not sure the Canadians lining up in food banks would think they're winning as part of the government strategy, but to move on, do you believe that part of your responsibility would be to remove some of the economic challenges facing Canadians of all races and backgrounds, perhaps even advocating for an end to the carbon tax, which is driving up the cost of living?
Madam Chair, I want to give one example. Because of the work that we have been doing, I'll give you an example of the Black Entrepreneurship Program. Because of that is yielding has supported more than 16,000 businesses, Black entrepreneurs across this country to be able to get into markets that they have never been able to get into before because of the work that we're putting in to support communities on the ground.
Thank you. And now I go to the Liberals for 6 minutes. Michael Coteau, Mr. Coteau, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Minister, for being here, and thank you to your team. I know that the work you've been doing is, there's no blueprint really for it from a Canadian perspective, a pan-Canadian perspective. It's the first time a government has put forward a plan like this nationally to tackle something that's not new. I was, that I worked on an anti-racism plan for Ontario, and we noticed from about 2012, like even the national numbers were increasing from that time period. There was a trajectory shift at that point in 2012. And we've seen a constant rise in hate crimes. And, we always tried to figure out, was it because we weren't collecting them properly? there was no standardization in how, reports came in. I know the RCMP has changed some of its methods of collecting that type of data, but it is tough work because there is no blueprint and it is new work. So thank you for the work you're doing, to you and your department. I've always looked at racism as not only a moral imperative, but there's an economic side of it. And you started talking a little bit about it. There's a cost to standing still, a cost to not doing anything. And as Canadians, we need to look for ways to remove barriers so we unleash the power of our people. And I think that's, that's one piece of why we're trying to tackle racism. So can you take a minute to just talk about some of the economic pieces within the plan that, may target the Indigenous community, Black community, just Canadians as a whole? Because it may target, for example, the Black community, but the benefits are for Canadians. We all benefit. When the next door neighbor is doing well, you're doing well, right? So can you talk a little bit about the economic, aspirations of this plan, and maybe talk about some of the success stories within the past work that's connected to this current plan?
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Mr. Couteau, and you and I have chatted many times offline, and I want to thank you for your leadership, particularly, as we were building on the work that I know we have been leading, but particularly your leadership on the work as a, the previous chair of the Black Caucus in our government to be able to lead this work. I want to talk about particularly on how this stems, because, as I was talking about, diversity exists in Canada, I think we all know, but, making sure that we're including people into our economy, including people into our structures, it actually benefits all Canadians. And particularly when you talk about the supports for Black Canadians, you would remember in 2017 when Canada officially adopted the UN Decade for the People of African Descent. Unfortunately, we adopted it late because the previous Conservative government didn't think that it was relevant to the community. What that roadmap, what that UN Decade of People of African Descent, when we adopted that as a Canadian government, what that led us to do is actually have a roadmap. The roadmap for how do we actually remove those systemic barriers for Black Canadians in this country. That led us to have an anti-racism secretariat within internally the federal government to look at different ways of how we address systemic racism within our institution. That led us to have, tangible investments into Black communities that weren't just, handouts to, as some members would like to say from the Conservative Party. It was actually doing the work and the partnership work within the community. I talk about the Supporting Black Communities initiative. This is a Black-led, Black-serving, program that is working alongside 4 national funders to be able to give grassroots organizations on the ground the supports that they need to build capacity. You and I would remember when the conversations we've had with so many different stakeholders from the community, that they said we just need to build capacity so we can help the people, because at the grassroots is where people know best and they have the best solutions, but sometimes they need a little bit of support. That has been a wonderful way how we have been leading this work alongside Black communities. The other things, I want to go back to the Black Entrepreneurship Program, because the success story of that program is incredible. 16,000 businesses are now been able to go through this program. It wasn't just, getting, get a little bit of access to capital, get some loans, but it was also about mentorship and about partnerships. I met a lady in Montreal, a single mom, who had started her business in Montreal, where she was, it's a pickle business that she started from her home. But because of this program and the knowledge hub that this program has, they were able to actually, she has her product in almost every grocery store in Canada. So she's a success story in terms of the work that's been happening because of the mentorship, because of the work. And to your point earlier around, it's not just for our own benefit, it's about creating good, well-paying jobs, for the community at large. But this is how you actively work with communities. And I think we all know when you include people, we all win. And that's fundamentally the way that we have been working along, and we're going to continue to do this work together. Thank you.
Remember when we established the anti-racism strategy in Ontario in 2016, the consultations we did the year before, they were pretty tough. And I'm sure you have a lot of conversations with a lot of people across the country. What are those conversations like today?
Well, I think we all recognize it's been a difficult time, right? But particularly as we know and as we navigate the challenging times, particularly with communities across this country, the conversation that I have with the Jewish community members, the rise in anti-Semitism that we have seen across this country, it is troubling. The rise in Islamophobia that we have seen across this country is troubling. And we need to make sure that we're supporting communities on the ground. That's the work we're leading across government. That's why we've been working, putting forward strategies, but also with tangible investments in them. And not just saying that this is not just one department leading this work. This is a whole of government approach. Talk about the Canada Action Plan on Combating Hate. It is 20 different, departments that are engaged on the work that's been that were 20 different initiatives with 7 different departments, from public safety to criminal justice system, to making sure that, with StatsCan, which plays a really big role in getting this aggregated data so we can get the right type of data. The fact that we're working with, law enforcement agencies, so communities know best how to report this data so we can have that data. So this is the work that we have been doing with the communities, and we're going to continue to do it.
Thank you. We're gone a little over time there, Michael. I'm going to go to Martin Champoux. Martin, Mr. Champoux, 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was paying attention to what the minister was saying about this entrepreneur woman from Montreal who started a pickle business, and I would appreciate, we can, I guess, all appreciate the success obtained by this individual, but they might be for some other time the minister comes to see us. But on a more serious note, thank you for coming today. And it's very important for us to get to talk to you. And it's on current news, what's happening. Our Conservative colleague was referring to this protest earlier this week on October 7th, of course, a significant date. And the slogans that were used during this protest made headlines. They were violent, and I don't remember having heard such violent slogans in protests in Quebec or in Canada. Maybe I'm mistaken, and colleagues can feel free to correct me, but people seem to think that it's legitimate to say things that, according to any reasonable person, goes beyond the limits of the freedom of speech in Canada. Death to Canada, death to the United States, death to Israel, and actions such as burning the flag of a nation, these are unacceptable. And you were saying, Minister, that you would be open to taking measures to counter this type of rhetoric. But there is a bill that is proposed by my party, which is asking the removal of the exemption from the criminal code, the religious exemption. So it refers to a section of the criminal law that allows a person to make such remarks if it fits under their religious beliefs. I don't think I'm mistaken, but I think there is some sort of a consensus between the political parties in the House on the fact that this exemption doesn't really make sense. And when we look at protests as the one that took place on Monday and what happened with Sharkawi, who said in November, and I'm going to quote again, very violent words, Allah take care of these aggressors of the Israeli state and exterminate them all and don't leave any one of them behind. So these individuals could say that they can say such things because it fits within their religious beliefs. In Quebec, in Canada, they can do this. And now you have your Combating Hate Action Plan, but we're not really seeing much evidence of this intention to remove this religious exemption from criminal code. So I'd like to hear you on that.
And thank you. Very important question. Look, the rise in hate absolutely needs to stop. And I think we all agree that it needs to stop. Two things I want to mention. I think first and foremost that in Canada, we have a Charter of Right and Freedom that actually protects people, that we have a right to peaceful protest. But it should not and it must not cross the line into hate and intimidation. I think we all agree with that. I think that's fundamental to who we are as Canadians. And to your point around the piece around hate speech, we have our online harms legislation, which I'm sure this committee knows full well, and that actually tackles some of the spread of hateful speech online as well as in the real world that we know it starts online and it trickles into our communities. This is something tangible, and I know my colleague Minister Virani is very much in touch with Bloc and others to be able to move forward on this. But I think we all fundamentally believe that it has, and I think I want to go back to one thing particularly. I think it has been a very difficult time for so many communities, and we need to make sure, and I think acknowledge the grief and pain and the anxiety and the fear that the communities are feeling. I also need to make sure that we all also understand that, I want to reiterate once again that we have, people have a right to peaceful protest.
Oui, mais là, je
and
vous
it should
arrête,
be
Madame la
peaceful.
Ministre. Je vous arrête parce que là, vous l'avez...
I'll interrupt you on that point, Minister, because you said that twice. You said that, and you are completely right. People absolutely have the right to protest in a peaceful manner. And even though sometimes it can get heated in peaceful protests, there's a limit to what can be accepted. Yeah, I mean, there was some heat, but it didn't turn into violence. But we heard calls to violence, calls to the death of a certain population, and violent calls, the likes of which we haven't seen before. And we have the tools available to us, but we're not really seeing any action. We're not seeing these people arrested by police, brought before justice for having held clearly hateful speech, which again, are not acceptable and go against all the principles of the freedom of speech that we have. So I don't understand why, despite having having heard these words many times, why are we not able to introduce a measure and take action against these people just to set the example for others who might follow their lead?
Madam Chair, if I may, and I want to thank my honourable colleague for his important question. What I will say to that is I know there's a law in place. We have these parameters in place. It is up to the jurisdictions. I know they're very much engaged, and particularly an event that happened on Wednesday, including in Montreal. And we hope that the local law enforcement agencies will be doing their job to make sure those that incite hate in this country are held accountable.
Thank you very much. I now go to the New Democratic Party, Nikki Ashton. Miss Ashton, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Welcome, Minister. In the foreword of the current anti-racism strategy, you said, quote, since the events of October 7th, 2023, we have seen unprecedented levels of hate towards Jewish, Muslim, Arab, and Palestinian communities right here in Canada. This is unquestionably true. We've seen a worrying explosion of hate and anger since then directed at members of these communities. The reality is no Jewish family should worry about the safety of their kids when they drop them off at Hebrew school. No Muslim should fear violence as they walk into a mosque. We have a responsibility as legislators to do everything in our power to protect communities from hate. Which is why I don't understand why your Liberal government steadfastly refused to define anti-Palestinian racism. You acknowledge it's a problem. The strategy explicitly recognizes Palestinians as a group that faces a unique form of racism. You acknowledge work needs to be done, but for some reason refuse to actually do that work. You refuse to consult with community members on the topic. Their voices were silenced. This can't come as a surprise. Thousands of Canadians wrote to you, calling on you to define anti-Palestinian racism. I've raised this repeatedly with officials in your office, and we've also raised it here at committee. And I would argue that ignoring these calls is frankly a clear and explicit example of systemic anti-Palestinian racism. You've refused to give a clear reason why you refuse to define anti-Palestinian racism. My question is, did you intentionally leave out anti-Palestinian racism from your Liberal anti-racism strategy, yes or no?
Madam Chair, if I may, and I want to thank my honourable colleague for the question, and I want to be very clear to all Canadians that this strategy is designed to support all Canadians that experience discrimination and racism, including Palestinian Canadians. That is very clear in the strategy. I think it's also important to recognize the fact that this strategy is meant to be evergreen. We never had a strategy. We put forward it in 2017 alongside community members because we knew we needed to do this work. We then extensively met with community members across this country, Madam Chair, to be able to talk about what more we can do to support communities. This came out of, Madam Speaker, the two summits that our government held on combating anti-Semitism and, of course, combating Islamophobia. We are obviously going to continue to listen to Canadians from all different backgrounds because we need to make sure this is a policy that every Canadian can see in. This is meant for every Canadian, including Palestinian Canadians.
With all due respect, the actual substance of the anti-racism strategy does not actually call out anti-Palestinian racism. And I want to go back to that question of consultation and definition. Given the fact that you refuse to define anti-Palestinian racism, I thought it would be appropriate to read into the record the definition provided by the Arab Canadian Lawyers Association. Anti-Palestinian racism takes various forms, including denying the Nakba and justifying violence against Palestinians, failing to acknowledge Palestinians as an indigenous people with a collective identity, belonging, and rights in relation to occupied and historic Palestine, erasing the human rights and equal dignity and worth of Palestinians, excluding or pressuring others to exclude Palestinian perspectives, Palestinians and their allies, defaming Palestinians and their allies with slander, such as being inherently anti-Semitic, a terrorist threat, or sympathizer, or opposed to democratic values. Why do you take issue with the Arab Canadian Lawyers Association definition of anti-Palestinian racism? Why wasn't their voice and their work that is cutting edge on this front included as part of your anti-racism strategy?
Madam Chair, we are going to continue to listen to all Canadians. This strategy is designed to support all Canadians that face racism and discrimination, including Palestinian Canadians. That is those words are exactly in the strategy, Madam Speaker. We're going to continue to make sure, and I also want to take a moment just to recognize the fact that this is meant to be evergreen. This is meant to evolve with the needs of the communities, and we're constantly going to be listening to communities to make sure that their voices are included and to ensure that we are at the forefront of leading this work. We continue to have very meaningful conversations, not just me. My predecessor had many conversations prior to me taking on this role. This is a work that takes time. This is a work that we need to make sure we are pragmatic and we're thoughtful in the conversations that we have with people, and everyone can see in the strategy that they're reflected in it. Thank you.
Well, I'll outline that it's not evergreen to exclude substantive action on anti-Palestinian racism. This is a very clear type of racism, and it's very disappointing to see the Liberals exclude it from the anti-racism strategy, but continue to play games with Palestinian and Arab communities, trying to score points by doing consultations that are not actually part of the department's work or influencing your anti-racism strategy. Moving on to another critical issue is anti-Indigenous racism, and we know that an insidious form of anti-Indigenous racism is residential school denialism. I'm proud of the work that my colleague MP Leah Gazan has done on this front with her bill, but we know that neither your party, the Liberals, or the Conservatives have come out with a clear position on this bill. And from the Conservatives, we've heard some very problematic statements, including from at least one candidate, Aaron Gunn, who thinks the only injustice of the residential school system isn't the genocide, but what's said about John A. Macdonald. Absolutely horrifying anti-Indigenous example of racism. Do you support my colleague Leah Gazan's bill, yes or no?
Madam Chair, I think we can all agree in this place the tragic...
It's a yes or no answer.
Madam Chair, as we all know, I think, and it's in the strategy as well, anti-Indigenous racism has played our systems systematically for generations. We as a government have been doing everything that we can to support communities on the ground. The work that my colleagues, Minister Ananda Sangri and Patty Hadu, has been leading is we know of the impact of that on the ground, and it's unfortunate that the member is playing political games with this, because I think this is fundamentally something that we need to be working
Will
on
you
together,
support the
and
bill?
we're going to continue.
not a
This
game.
is not a debate, Ms. Ashton. I think the time is up. We're going to go to the second round, and this is a 5-minute round. And so we begin with Mr. Giovanni for 5 minutes, please, for the Conservatives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The minister's colleague, MP Anthony Housefather, is actually on Twitter right now agreeing with the Conservative position that Sammy Doon should be listed as a terrorist entity. I wonder if the minister responsible for anti-racism would agree with her colleague, Mr. Housefather, and the Conservative Party on that position.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure if my colleague was in the House during question period, and this was a question that was posed to the Minister of Public Safety, and I think he was very clear in his answer. Any indication or...
Good enough for Mr. Housefather, so I thought maybe the party's position had changed since then.
Madam Chair, through you, I think we can all agree any listing of a terrorist organization is not done by politicians, is done by the advice of our national and security intelligence. We take public safety extremely seriously. This is a work that our intelligence does on a daily basis, with our Five Eye partners. And the minister, as he mentioned in the House of Commons today,
I think the minister may want to meet with Mr. Housefather to discuss this, but okay, answer received. No,
Madam Chair, I think it's important to get the answer on the record. I think it's important to get my answer on the record. Thank you. And as the Minister of Public Safety indicated, that he has urgently asked for an expedited advice from the National Security Intelligence, and he'll have an answer in the next coming days.
I don't think that's fast enough for Mr. Housefather. I hope you guys can have a conversation.
Mr. Housefather is not a member of this
It's on Twitter. You can look at it. Okay.
Let's move on.
We'll keep moving. Does the minister support the government's black justice strategy as part of the anti-racism strategy?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Are you familiar with some of the radical criminal justice policies that your government's black justice strategy is considering at the moment?
Madam Speaker, I think it's important to recognize that the work that we're leading, working alongside Black communities right across this country, is fundamentally something that we have heard from communities members on the ground of addressing systemic racism within our criminal justice system, which is important that we address. This is the work that my colleague, Minister Virani, is leading. There's nothing that has been, there's no decisions have been made yet around the strategy, but I know we're going to be working alongside community members to make sure that communities...
Is the minister familiar with a document called the Roadmap for Transformative Change that was released this summer?
Madam Speaker, this is a work that my colleague, Minister Irani, is leading. We have very meaningful conversations on how to address systemic racism within our criminal justice system, which we know.
Your colleague, Minister Virani, described this document as, quote, history-making for the Black community and, quote, important milestone for the Black community. It seems like something the anti-racism strategy leader may be familiar with, but it sounds like you're not. So just to recap
Point of
a couple
order,
of the...
Madam Chair? Yes. It's not appropriate for a committee member. They may ask their questions, but suggesting things that have not been said into the record is inappropriate. And I'd ask that Mr. Giovanni just stick to his thoughts and not try to speak on behalf of the minister. She's more than capable of doing that on her own. Unless he would like to just continue with his questions, then committee can get back to it.
That's not a point of order, Madam Chair. You know, as a Black Canadian, I've been assured that the anti-racism strategy is a whole-of-government approach. And if my community is told by the Minister of Justice that something is, and I quote, history-making and important milestone for Black people that the leader of the anti-racism strategy would be familiar with it? I think that's a fair question. Nonetheless, some of the policies that are included in this include mass decarceration, reducing the number of incarcerated people by 30% over the next 10 years, decriminalizing a supply of 30 days worth of hard drugs, including cocaine, heroin, and meth, and also defunding police departments by removing 25% of federal grants from eligibility to police
30
organizations.
seconds.
So the question I have is, do you support these radical criminal justice policies that your government has published as part of the Black Justice Strategy?
Madam Speaker, I think it would only be a conservative making a joke out of, making a joke out of systemic racism that
This is
we
not a
have
joke.
seen an
You wanna flood our communities
over-incarceration
with drugs.
of
I have
Black
a
and
right to
Indigenous
ask you
people
questions
in
about
our
it.
criminal
Order,
justice system.
order.
To be making a joke
Order,
about
please.
that it is disgraceful.
Mr.
But I expect better. I would think I
Mr.
would expect
Giovanni,
better
allow the
from
minister
people.
to answer the question, please.
Nobody's laughing, Madam Chair. They're flooding our communities with drugs. This is a problem.
That's not true.
Go to the second question for 5 minutes, please. The Liberals, Jennifer O'Connor. Ms. O'Connor, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the Minister, thank you for being here today. Mr. Giovanni spoke about what's on Twitter, so let's talk about a few things that's also on Twitter. I'm wondering, given, as we've talked about a lot here from all colleagues, about the increasing rise in anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, certainly Holocaust denialism is something that I have never seen before like this. And certainly, I wonder if you think it would be helpful when members of the Conservative Party go and sit and dine with German politicians who actually, within their party, believe that the Holocaust was a hoax. I wonder if conservatives who care a lot about what happens on Twitter, posting and amplifying hateful rhetoric towards the Jewish community, and those members still sit in the front row of conservative benches, have gone there's been no retribution or reprimand for promoting people who share hateful Holocaust denialism. Do you think that is helpful in the reduction of anti-Semitic hate that we're seeing in this country?
We're all shocked, and that's why I find it a bit rich every single time conservative members would get up and talk about hate when their own members would actively meet with neo-Nazis from Germans and still not denounce and apologize for that. The fact that their own leader will go meet with white supremacists of Diagolon, which we know, an organization that fundamentally believe that people like you and I, Madam Speaker, do not exist in Canada.
Madam Chair, I expect when a minister is coming here that they're going to behave with such decorum that we can have a discussion around the topic at hand instead of trying to bring disorder to this area. I would ask you, Madam Chair, the same way we'd ask the Speaker in the House to encourage members to remember we are all honorable members and not to use their pedestal to be able to throw such, such rhetoric.
Aspiration of hate.
No, excuse me, I have the floor here.
I mean, it is on Twitter.
No, she's a minister of the Crown.
This isn't a point of order.
And simply throwing out things that cause disorder, Madam Chair, I believe is against the whole purpose of this meeting.
I will allow the minister to answer. Go ahead, Minister.
Honourable colleague needs to realize the fact that there are consequences to their actions. There are consequences to the actions that their leaders and their members of the Conservative Party make. When their leader was actively putting on his hashtag videos, putting on hashtags on his YouTube videos that attract men who hate women, that has consequences. When he meets with a far-right extremist and do not denounce that, that has consequences. Diagalong is an organization that fundamentally believe that you and I, Madam Speaker, people of color do not exist in Canada. That has consequences. When they meet with neo-Nazis, German neo-Nazis, and do not denounce that they've done that, that has consequences for people on the ground. It is shameful for the Conservative members to sit there and pretend like they care about hate in this country when they know within their caucus there are people that court to this far-right extremists that has real consequences for people on the ground. We have seen that in our communities. We have seen that, unfortunately, lives have been taken away. There's consequences to hate, and they need to apologize to Canadians and denounce such hate when it occurs in this country.
Thank you, Minister. Following up on recent meetings of Conservatives with those who distribute hate on our streets, as their questions spoke about off the top, Mr. Cooper, another MP for the Conservative Party, just a couple of weeks ago, was seen meeting with those who were protesting,
Point of order.
holding up
Point of order.
Russian flags. They really are uncomfortable.
Point of order, Mr. Wall.
Mr. Cooper did not meet with them. He was at a restaurant where these individuals
Hope
were
this
there.
isn't-
Kevin, you can't answer that. This is a point of order. I think that what we see here is when we allowed questions to be asked about other members, about people like Mr. Housefather, about naming other groups as being hate groups, I think this is fair game to ask questions about groups that are considered to be hateful and who meets with them. And I think that this is a reasonable question to ask, and I think Ms. O'Connell, go ahead.
Madam Chair, and they did open that door, and that's precisely why I'm raising these questions. Mr. Cooper met with groups in Ottawa who we saw firsthand were spreading disinformation towards queer kids and trans people in this country, a level of violence that the members opposite have not raised, the Conservatives in particular have not raised. Can you speak about hate towards our queer kids and how, once again, meeting with individuals who spread such hate on our streets only emboldens them and does not reduce hate and does not create a culture of inclusivity?
Thank you. Minister, I will give you 30 seconds to answer that because I took out the time for the points of order and the discussion on the floor. Thank you. Go ahead. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my colleague is absolutely right. There are consequences to hate. If you leave it unchecked, it has real consequences on the ground. And as Ms. O'Connell mentioned, when you see members of an official opposition, when you see members of the Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives meet with these groups that incite hate within communities, it has consequences for people on the ground. They need to apologize to Canadians. They need to denounce their acts because Canadians deserve better because lives are at stake. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I now go to document 4. Martin Champoux, 2.5 minutes, please, Martin.
Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. This will be quick, but I might need to interrupt you, so apologies for that. Minister, do you think that Amira Al-Gawabi is doing a good job? Do you support the words she has been saying since her appointment?
Madam Chair, our Special Representative on Combating Islamophobia does incredibly important work to support Muslim Canadians
Madame
right
la
across
Ministre,
this country.
Comme je vous disais, Madame
And
la
yes,
Ministre,
Minister, as I was saying, okay, so Madame Al-Gawabi said in 2019 that in Quebec there is an anti-Muslim feeling that's generalized. Do you agree with that?
I think it's important to recognize, Madam Speaker, that Ms. Al-Gawabi speaks to many Muslim Canadians right across this country, including in Quebec, and I think it's important to recognize the important conversations that she has with community members and to make sure that we're addressing some of those concerns as we do with all Canadians.
Donc, Madame la Ministre, c'est correct pour vous de généraliser.
So, Minister, it's okay for you to generalize and say that in Quebec, in general, people are anti-Muslim, and he's also was exchanging with Mr. Joseph Howell on Twitter and said that they suffered from British colonialism in Canada. That's the biggest community. And she responded saying, I'm going to vomit, Ms. Al-Gawabi. And then she also recently said that universities should hire more Muslim, Palestinian, and Arab professors to help people better understand the situation. And you answered a question in the House recently about documents and emails that Madam Al-Gawabi should produce, and she hasn't, despite a request to access for information. So will you continue to say that Madam Al-Gawabi is a good person to build bridges between communities or making sure that there is a calm social environment? So do you not agree that this person, and taking into account the position of the Quebec government, National Assembly, should she still be in position?
Chair, through you, if I may, the honourable member talked about universities and colleges. I think it's important to recognize that universities and colleges make decisions about their own hiring practices. They all have their own rules about diversity and inclusion. Ms. Al-Gawabi does important work talking to community members in her role as a special envoy on combating Islamophobia in this country, and making sure that we're having, we know systemic racism is real within our institutions across this country. She plays an important role in talking to community members, makes recommendations to ensure that we're supporting communities on the ground. I think it's important to have those important conversations alongside members. I hope my member from Bloc will agree that we need to be doing this work.
Time is up. Thank you. Now I'm going to go to Nikki Ashton for the NDP. 2.5 minutes, please. 2.5 minutes, Nikki.
Thank you. Minister, you've referred a fair bit to the whole of government approach that is very important for your department. So I want to just reflect on that for a moment. Take, for example, the lawyers that represent Canada in court, as they have been this week, fighting First Nations like Shamattawa and Tataskiwak Cree Nation in my region in northern Manitoba. In arguments filed with the court obtained by my office, Liberal government-hired lawyers argued that First Nations don't have a right to clean drinking water and that seeks to blame First Nations for this government's own failures. I struggle to take this seriously when the same Liberal-hired lawyers say that any proclamation is just, quote, context-specific, which, as one lawyer explained to me, is basically just legalese for political theatre. We have the Prime Minister who's been quoted as saying everyone in Canada should have access to clean water. The Government of Canada continues to work in partnership with First Nations. However, your lawyers, your government's lawyers, deny that there's a partnership. Or former Minister Mark Miller, who said, but one thing has not changed, the right for individuals to have access to potable water, and we are determined to ensure that this right is upheld for everyone. Once again, Liberal lawyers this week argued that this right should not, in fact, be upheld for everyone. You've come here to talk about your anti-racism strategy that incorporates a significant piece on anti-Indigenous racism. You've talked about the importance of a whole-of-government approach. And yet your government is fighting 59 First Nations, including some of the poorest First Nations in Canada, who do not have clean drinking water, and telling them that your commitments don't actually apply to them, that they are context-specific, that your government does not actually have an obligation to provide clean drinking water. Is that not an example of systemic racism at play? Does that not fly in the face of the commitment to reconciliation your government has made? How can you stand by with a commitment to whole-of-government approach, with a commitment to anti-Indigenous racism and action on that front, when your own government is denying one of the most basic human rights to First Nations, the right to clean drinking water?
I think we all agree that every single person should have access to clean drinking water. That is fundamentally something that we as a government, after years of underfunding by the Conservative governments, that we have been working alongside members of our community, members of the Indigenous partners right across this country. We'll continue to do this work till we make sure that there is no one left that cannot have clean drinking water in this country.
Sure. I now move to the second round. We're still on the second round. Mr. Good, for you are sharing with Kevin Wall, are you? Go ahead. 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister. Thank you to the department officials. Now, I'll have more of a technical question. But, Madam Minister, I will ask that you answer the question. I was looking at the news, and I saw an article by Milan Craig, and what drew my attention was the following. Canada's anti-Islamophobia special representative should provide 3,000 pages of documents to La Presse, and there's been recently an instruction for the production of these documents, but Madam Al-Gawabi chose to ignore this request. So there is an instruction from the commissioner that actually goes beyond the request, a request for access to information. And 3,000 pages, that ties into a complaint. So the documents were not produced. Was it because the office of Madame Al-Gawabi refused to do so, or the Canadian Heritage, or yourself? Who was involved? Because according to the article, it's not very clear. So if you can explain to me how things unfolded.
This is a very important question, and I think it's important to first and foremost recognize we are always committed to an open and transparent government. Because of the scope of the request, I know extension was required, but I will turn to my officials to be able to give you a fulsome answer of the process.
Je vais vous répondre en français. Alors, quelques...
I'll answer your question in French. So the first point is that the office of the special representative was very small when they started, so she built her team as she went along. And the second point is that at the department, we are offering services to the special representative in these kinds of processes, and we could have done a better job in that process. But as you mentioned, these instructions, these requests will be sent directly to my office rather than just to the ATIP office. So I take personal responsibility for not having supported the special representative as we should have. So if I understand this correctly, they went beyond the deadline, and now you're going to take care of it personally? Absolutely. And had I known, I would have made additional resources available to help the special representative. And initially, she had a very small office, so the procedure will now be different going forward. So last question. The documents, have they been provided now? Yes, last Monday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. 2 minutes and 50 seconds on the dot, Mr. Gould. Really well done. Kevin, you now have to keep up that.
A lot of pressure here, Madam Speaker. Thank you to department officials and the minister. Now, according to Canada's new anti-racism strategy, the special envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism has, and I'll quote, both an international and domestic role, unquote. You may be aware, Minister, I had the original PMB, C-250. It proposed massive penalties for the promotion of anti-Semitism. But in the wisdom of your government, you decided to take my bill. My bill, C-250, had teeth. It was strong. You have weakened this bill. When I look at what your government has done and not done compared to what my bill would have done, it's night and day. So I'm a little concerned when you start taking bills at budget time, putting them in, and then not following up, because my bill 250 had major consequences. I don't see any consequences in the proposed bill that I had from what you have taken today. And I want to know why you haven't followed up on some of my recommendations on C-250.
Madam Chair, if I may, I'd love to hear from my colleague about some of those recommendations.
Well, I wanted to know why you took my bill, first of all. Obviously, you had some ideas. It was a great bill, then why didn't you follow on some of the consequences that I had? On hate speech, on anti-Semitism, on Holocaust denial, which you haven't followed on any of them. We have more anti-Semitism because of your Liberal government today than we did when I brought the bill in a year and a half ago.
That is incorrect. I think we all recognize there's been challenging times, but to imply that there's more anti-Semitism because of one individual or one party is quite, frankly, Shameful.
Up, Mr. Wall. I now go to Mr. Nur Mohammed for the Liberals. 5 minutes, please. Tell it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being with us today. I am very proud to represent a riding that has a large Jewish community and large institutions of the Jewish community, 6 synagogues, 2 Jewish schools. I'm very proud to have in my riding the oldest mosque in British Columbia. I'm very proud to have a vibrant Sikh community. And, you know, my parents told me that showing up for your community matters. It's not just about words. And on October 7th, I was privileged to attend the remembrance ceremony for victims of October 7th. It was interesting to note that not one Conservative member of Parliament showed up. During Ramadan, I was privileged to be with my community. It was important to note that not one Conservative member of Parliament showed up to meet with the Muslim community. But showing up also matters in votes, and I would love your thoughts on this. In Vancouver Granville alone, the Conservative Party voted against funding for the Vancouver Holocaust Education Centre, which was a specific line item in the budget. They voted against funding for the expansion of the Jewish Community Centre in my riding. They voted against funding for the Hellenic community in my riding. They voted against funding for the Canada Community Safety Program, which has affected gurdwaras, masajid, and Jewish temples in my riding. What message does it send to Jews, Muslims, Indigenous people, Asian Canadians, and so many others when Conservatives talk about fighting racism and don't show up where it actually matters in the votes that matter to Canadians?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his question and for always being very pragmatic and always bringing people together. And it's something I think we all fundamentally believe, that we are lucky to have such members in our caucus. When you talk about the work that we're doing to combat anti-Semitism in this country, you're absolutely right. We as a government have been very deliberate about making that choice to invest in Canadians by listening to Canadians. And you know, some of the fundings that you talked about with the Conservative government actually voted against, it's shameful. This came from the recommendations on the summits that we held on combating anti-Semitism. This came from the communities that said we needed to have the support, and they voted against. So you're absolutely right. Millions of dollars for the first ever special envoy, Deborah Lyons, to fight anti-Semitism and to preserve Holocaust education. We made sure that this position exists within the Government of Canada because we know how much it matters. $25 million for a new Montreal Holocaust Museum, which you alluded to, that they voted against. $5 million for the first ever National Holocaust Remembrance Program within our anti-racism strategy that is going directly for education around Holocaust remembrance and making sure that it never happens again in this country, to make sure we're supporting communities on the ground. You know, funding for the Holocaust Education Center, which we know is fundamental to talking about, the work that needs to happen on the ground. So, you know, it's always a bit rich to hear the Conservatives say anything, because they're all about slogans. They're not about solutions. We know these things take time. It is deliberate work that we need to work alongside community members with partners on the ground. But we have seen them time and time again vote against and cut funding for these very organizations that the communities, the Jewish community has asked for, that they have voted against. It's quite frankly shameful.
Thank you, Minister. And I know I have about 40 seconds.
No, you have a minute.
I have a minute left. Minister, I won't abuse it, Madam Chair. Minister, one of the things that I and I know others have been preoccupied with quite substantially is the role of far-right extremism, the impact that it's been having on women, on journalists, on Indigenous peoples, and the role of misinformation in this. And on May 7th, I had given notice of motion, and Madam Chair, at this time I'd like to move that motion, if I might, which reads as follows. pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study of no less than 4 meetings to study the concerning rise in far-right extremism in Canada. That study include how far-right extremism plays a role in misinformation and disinformation, how to better support preventable measures for ideologically motivated extremism in Canada, and the connection between far-right extremism and harassment towards journalists, women, Indigenous peoples, Black and racialized communities, members of the 2S LGBTQI+ community, and religious minorities, that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests that the government table a comprehensive response to the report. This has been distributed, Madam Chair, on May 7th in both official languages, and I would now like to move that motion.
So moved, but I think we're going to try and get everybody a copy of it because the clerk is looking for it. It was May 7th, which is
yes.
a few months ago. So we're going to get it and send it to everybody. So what I'll do is suspend. But before I do, I want to thank the minister for coming. I want to thank the minister for her performance and on being very clear on some of the things she needed to say and answering the questions in a way, sometimes feisty, but there were feisty questions, Minister, so you were feisty in answering them. And I want to thank you for your presence here. So I'm going to suspend now so we can get copies of this motion. Thank you again, Minister. To everybody? You all got it? Before I start? You got it, Nikki? Okay. Well, we have to let Mr. Nur Mohammed move his, now we've got his motion, let him speak to it, and then I will entertain things. So I'll put your name down. Let's put Nikki's name down. Yeah? Go ahead, you have the floor. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I gave notice of motion
Point of order, Madam Chair, if you don't mind. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I thought we discussed this motion already.
No, we never did. It was just sent, it has
No,
not, never
back
been
in May.
discussed. No?
Back in May, you brought the motion out, and in May,
No? It was never tabled, it was sent. Notice of motion was sent.
and we never discussed
No, we
it.
never discussed it.
Could you get a clarification from the clerk?
I'm going to check. I'm
Yeah?
going to check. We never discussed it. I can't remember us ever discussing it.
I would have to go look through the history, but right now, I'm not sure about that.
Okay, Mr. Nur Mohammed, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So while you check on whether it was discussed or not, I mean, I know it was, I can confirm it was never voted on to the best of my recollection. As far as, I don't even know if we discussed it fully, but I do want to make sure that if it has been discussed, that if there needs to be amendments to it, let's amend it, let's vote on it. If it has not been discussed, let's have a proper and robust discussion, which is what I believe we should have. When I initially gave notice of this motion, it was with consultation with other parties because there is a substantial and growing concern about the role of far-right extremism in this country. The connection between the harassment, intimidation of communities, and journalists and others as a direct result of misinformation that is being spread through far-right extremist narrative is something that we should all be concerned about, regardless of our political parties, regardless of which part of the country we come from. This is something that Canadians, I think, would expect us to take seriously. This is not about targeting any one specific ethnic group. It is actually about all Canadians. And I think our opportunity here as a committee is to undertake a serious, very real study about the way in which far-right extremism in this country is impacting people's lives in very, very serious and very dangerous ways. So I'm hopeful that all in this committee will support this motion, and we can get going on ensuring that we put time down for this study and we have the hard conversations that we need to have to come back with recommendations, and that we get government to ensure that we get a comprehensive response to that report in short order.
Ms. Ashton?
I would like to make an amendment to the motion.
By the way, I checked with the analysts, and it was posted, but it was tabled, but it was never discussed.
Okay. So the amendment is after the committee, in the language after the committee, which is in line 1, we would add, condemn the leader of the official opposition for visiting a convoy camp that celebrated far-right extremists and a group whose founder was referred to as a violent extremist by Canada's Integrated Terrorism Assessment Centre. And.
Can you be slower a little bit, please?
Yeah.
We're trying to type it. Go ahead.
We can send you a copy. I think we may have. Yeah, we already have. Oui, la copie qu'on a envoyée, c'est en français, les bilingues.
It's bilingual.
That?
Yes, please repeat it, Nikki.
Okay, so after the committee in line 1, we propose to add, condemn the leader of the official opposition for visiting a convoy camp that celebrated far-right extremists and a group whose founder was referred to as a violent extremist by Canada's Integrated Terrorism Assessment Centre. And.
Thank you. So now we have an amendment on the floor. We're going to discuss the amendment. Michael, the amendment?
Point of order? Point of order, Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Moore?
We're seeing that May 9th this was discussed. It's in the minutes.
The analyst just looked it
It's
up.
in the minutes of May 9th. And would also like to suspend. But we did see it in the minutes from May 9th and would like to suspend.
I don't think the suspending can be done with a point of order. So I
Well,
have the floor.
no, I have a request to suspend so that the
Hold on.
one party
I
can
had the-
discuss
but I had
amongst
the-
them.
But I had the floor. He did a point of order. His point of order was to bring reference to the May 9th reference.
he-
And then he said, can we suspend? That doesn't, you can't do that.
Yes, he can do that. He can ask for
On a point of order, I can just say point of order
No, no,
anytime
no,
and
no, no.
request to suspend?
He didn't ask for, said he had a point of order,
I
which
won't
was to
argue with
say
the chair.
it was already discussed, Mr.
I won't
Cotto.
argue- I
And
won't
now
argue
he's
with the
saying he
chair.
wants to suspend. I don't see the problem in suspending for a short period of time for the Conservatives to discuss amongst themselves how they deal with this. Okay? Go ahead, and Liberals can discuss, and everybody else can discuss, talk to themselves. Yes, suspend?
Absolutely correct. It was-
And then you'll be first up. Mr. Cotto, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to move a motion to adopt this motion now.
So moved. We will have a vote so that the committee can proceed to adopting this motion now. What? Yeah, to consider this motion.
So point of
So
order.
we will resume the debate on it. Now, let's get the vote. Will you consider adopting the motion?
Just to clarify, we are now voting so that we
To
can talk
put
about
the
the
motion back on
not
the
to pass
table,
it or fail
yes.
it. We're just trying to talk about
Yeah.
it. Fine. Okay.
Yes?
Just if you could explain to me, Madam Chair, so Member Ashton began to do an amendment, so she was not in order to do that because Mr. Noor Mohammed was not in a position to move something because the business of the committee was left undone from
We were still trying to
June.
find all of that information, and we just found
from the
it
meeting
all.
of May 9th, and it was discovered by the clerk. Oh, okay, well, good.
So we now got to exactly where we were on that day, and so I have to now entertain the motion that this committee now discuss this or entertain this motion to be part of today's
But
proceedings.
the question I would ask, Madam Chair, is that if Mr. Nur Mohammed had not, because he moved something incorrectly, so we shouldn't even be in this discussion. We actually should still be dealing with the business of the committee.
No. He had to move it. We now have to decide that we want to not adopt the motion, but that
Well,
we
we shouldn't
want
be
to deal with the
discussing
motion.
his motion without a resumption first.
Well, no, we're not discussing his motion. We're discussing Mr. Coteau's motion, that the committee now consider
But
this
he
motion.
wasn't. Technically, he wouldn't have had the floor earlier, would he?
Yes, it was his turn on the floor. His name was here.
Yeah.
After Ash was Coteau. His name is here. After that is Shampoo.
But it was on his motion.
So I still had the
That
floor.
was not
at that point.
correct.
Well,
I'm just
no,
pointing
but
out that there seems to be a little bit of
There is not really a discrepancy because we had suspended, and he is now had the floor because he was on the floor. He isn't going to speak to the motion. He's just moved a motion.
Okay, thank you for explaining it to me.
That's good. Now, we have a motion on the floor that this committee consider Mr. Nur Mohammed's motion. Now, let's call the vote.
Is this a debatable motion?
No. We're going to call the vote.
Just take more time.
All right?
No. I personally wanted to listen to what the deputy had to say in her role as an accounting officer. So, but
I know what you, well, then you know how to vote, okay? If you don't want to discuss the motion, you can vote against it.
thank you for explaining it to me.
Okay? Go ahead.
And the motion is, shall the committee proceed to the consideration of the motion from May 9th? Mr. Nur Mohammed.
Oui.
Mr. Baptiste.
Oui.
Madam Dillon.
Oui.
Mr. Coteau.
Oui.
Monsieur Lightbound.
Oui.
Mr. Waugh.
No.
Mr. Gould.
No.
Mr. Giovanni.
No.
Mr. Albus.
No.
Mr. Shampoo.
Oui.
Madam Ashton.
Oui.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
The motion is now going to be considered by this committee. You're now going to be speaking to the motion, Mr. Albus, because that's where we're moving now. We've adopted the motion. So you're speaking to the motion.
Point of order.
But go ahead. Let's
So,
hear the point of order.
The reason why we moved off the business that was previous scheduled, as in the minister and the deputy minister, Mr. Nur Mohammed had made a motion during his round of questioning.
Yes, which he's free to do.
Well, Madam Chair, though, he didn't move the motion that we just did. So procedurally, Mr. Coteau shouldn't have even been able to have the floor to speak to his motion because technically his motion should have been ruled out of order in the very beginning.
Well, no, because we did not have the information on the motion. If you recall, it was archived, and the clerk and the analysts were looking to find out what the status of the motion was to decide if the committee can consider it. It was found that the status of the motion meant that it had to be reconsidered by this committee. That motion was moved by Mr. Coteau because we were starting after suspending, and the committee has agreed they want to go to consider this motion.
But,
that's a vote. I'm sorry,
Madam
Mr.
Madam Chair,
Albus.
though,
No.
Mr. Coteau shouldn't have had the floor in the first place because it was not his
Mr.
time to
Coteau
speak
had his
during
hand
questioning.
up. Mr. Coteau had his hand up. I can recognize, if you would put your hand up, I would have recognized you.
Okay, Madam
He had
Chair,
his hand
I'm
up.
just pointing
Thank
out
you.
that there seems to be
No.
a real lapse of logic here.
No, I don't think there is. Okay? So let's go ahead. Now, the motion is on the floor and is to be considered. Speaking to the motion, Mr. Coteau.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to thank the member for bringing this motion forward back.
Rappel au règlement, Madame la Présidente.
Point of order, Chair. Madam Chair, point of order. Madam Chair, can we let the witnesses go? Because
Okay, I will do that. Yes, Mr. Nur Mohammed, a point of order?
Just, yeah, same thing as Mr. Gould. I mean, if we dispense of this motion quickly and we pass it, we can get back to the official. So I don't know if
So I
it
think
depends.
it's premature. Let's see what we do with this motion. It may be 10 minutes, although I doubt it very much knowing this committee. But therefore, we could go ahead with it. Mr. Coteau, go ahead.
Okay, point
You have
of
the
order.
floor.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just procedurally, I made an amendment. We obviously sent the text. Okay.
You have to remake
So-
it, Nikki, because we're now officially considering
Right.
the motion. So
Okay.
you have to remake it. Mr.
Okay,
Coteau, you're
so-
speaking to Mr. Nur Mohammed's motion as unamended?
You know what? I will take my name off the list.
All right, okay. Ms. Ashton,
Okay, so I would like to make that amendment to the motion at this time. To
we
add.
have the amendment, actually. I think everyone had it. Does anyone want it again? Do you want to remake it?
You're circulating.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so just to make sure, again, it would be adding the following text after the language, the committee, in line 1. Condemn the leader of the official opposition for visiting a convoy camp that celebrated far-right extremists and a group whose founder was referred to as a violent extremist by Canada's Integrated Terrorism Assessment Centre and.
Okay, thank you. So we've got you speaking to your amendment, Nikki. And then I see Mr. Shampoo's hand up.
Yes.
And am I seeing other hands up to the amendment we're now speaking?
Un rappel au règlement.
Miss,
Point of order.
À l'amendement, est-ce qu'on pourrait la recevoir dans les deux langues officielles?
Can we have the amendment in both official languages?
we have it in both official languages. Would you like to get recirculated now to everyone?
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay, Nikki? Speak.
And so, of course, originally I put forward this amendment at the beginning of May following a meeting of the leader of the official opposition that took place at the end of April when he stopped at videos posted to social media, the opposition leader was seen as thanking and encouraging people who were camped in what was described as a convoy-style protest. And in that time, he also met with people that indicated support for Diagolon, which is an organization that, as I pointed out in the amendment, is referred to as a violent extremist organization by Canada's Integrated Terrorism Assessment Centre. So I think we have to be very clear here. We're not talking about theoretical dog whistle politics. We are talking about a leader of the official opposition, somebody who clearly aspires to be prime minister, who met with individuals who espouse vile, racist, bigoted, far-right views, and then turned around and failed to condemn this organization and obviously people that would support it. It's very clear in the previous hour we have a real problem in Canada with the rise of the far right. We have seen an explosion of hate crimes in our country targeting minority communities. We have seen hate crimes targeted at the Chinese community, Asian Canadians, hate crimes against the Jewish community, horrifying examples of anti-Semitism. We've seen clear, disturbing acts of Islamophobia. And of course, I talked about the ongoing reality of anti-Palestinian racism, which unfortunately the Liberals are not taking seriously either. And what's clear to me is that we need to be taking on the rise of the far right in the clearest of terms, and that means condemning politicians who, dare I say, play footsie with the far right, who fail to condemn the far right, and whose actions in many cases fuel the far right, legitimizing, normalizing absolutely abhorrent views that have no place not just in Canada but anywhere in the world. Canada is going down a dangerous path. We're a country that has often talked about, been a leader, I should say, when it comes to diversity, multiculturalism, inclusion, and we've fallen behind on many fronts, and there's a lot of work to do. But I believe that right now, at this time, we are facing a crisis when it comes to the rise of the far right. I believe supporting this amendment is a clear example of calling out mainstream support that we see from the Conservative leader who aspires to be Prime Minister on this front. And of course, I do think that supporting a study on this, on the rise of the far right, is critical. Canadians are concerned. Many Canadians are targets, have been victims of hate crimes and the rise of the far right. I think this is a timely issue, a critical issue that we in the Heritage Committee have the responsibility to take on. But I do believe that it begins by condemning the individual who aspires to be Prime Minister and has all too often cited or seen to be very close and supportive of people whose views are deeply disturbing and definitely unacceptable. So I certainly hope that members of the committee will join me in supporting this amendment, and of course I hope we can move forward in supporting this study as soon as possible.
Thank you, Nikki. Now, Martin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when you suggest a study idea, that's at least what I think. Once again, maybe not everyone has the same methods of working in mind, but when you're proposing an idea for a study, it's because we want to hear from people, from witnesses, to get information. And one thing we shouldn't be doing is jumping to conclusions right away. Maybe with Mr. Nur Mohammed's motion, we could have exposed these facts that the leader of the official opposition went and met with these people. We could have talked about these. We could have discussed these issues. But putting that directly into the amendment, I think it's counterproductive once again. And with all due respect, it is just adding a partisan element, and I do agree with my colleagues, Ms. Ashton's opinion on this behavior that doesn't have its place in politics. I completely agree, but here we're talking about doing a study in committee. Now, maybe my Conservative colleagues would have agreed had it not been for this amendment, because this is something that affects everyone, and everyone's opinions are interesting. Even though you might not agree with someone, you may want to hear from them. So once again, we are putting something into a motion, an element that is very partisan and that disrupts the essence of the motion brought forward by Mr. Nur Mohammed and about which we had discussions previously in spring. And I thought that I would think that this will be an important study. So I will be against this amendment without thinking that we can still, of course, have these discussions, do this study, but we need to do this in a context that is going to be a bit more objective than what's the essence of this amendment. So I support the motion in its original form. That's a discussion we want to have, and that's a discussion that, of course, is very timely in the aftermath of the motion that we adopted on the freedom of expression. So these are closely tied issues, and that would have been very interesting. And we were speaking to the minister, and we could have spoken to the assistant and deputy ministers. But once again, we have this very entertaining motion that's before us, and we still have our witnesses with us to push us onwards. But I'm going to vote against the amendment without disagreeing with the intention of talking about these topics.
Mr. Shampoo, and I go to Talib Nur Mohammed to the amendment.
Yes.
Mr. Nur Mohammed, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a really important motion, and the amendment that Ms. Ashton has put forward, I would love to be able to support. However, here is my challenge. My challenge is this. There is nothing that Ms. Ashton has said about condemning the Leader of the Opposition for visiting a Diagolon camp that I disagree with. It must be condemned in the strongest possible terms, and every political leader in this country has an obligation not to hang out with far-right, violent, extremist organizations. What I would say is this. This is an important motion without the amendment. Without the amendment, I would challenge my Conservative colleagues to support this, so we strip out anything that might be perceived as a partisan attack, rightly or wrongly, and we all get to work on this important work. I cannot see a reasonable-minded Canadian that would not want us to do this work as a committee. My concern is that if we support Madame Ashton's motion, this will end up in a filibuster exactly like happened when we brought this up the last time. So while I agree with the sentiment that Ms. Ashton has put forward, and I think that there need to be real serious conversations about where politicians show up and what that means to Canadians, my fear is that this important study will be derailed completely if we decide to, if the amendment is passed, because Conservative colleagues will use that as an opportunity to filibuster. So my request, if Ms. Ashton is willing to withdraw that amendment, that we do that, and we hope that Conservatives will join us in supporting and getting this motion passed. If that's not going to happen, then we will see where the votes land. And if the amendment is defeated, I would hope that Conservatives would see no problem at all, in having a meaningful, thoughtful conversation about the impact of far-right extremism, about misinformation, and the impact that it is having on people's lives.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gourde? To the amendment.
Yeah, oui, c'est ça, Madame la Présidente. On va parler.
Yes, we're going to talk about the amendment, Madam Chair. I was listening to Ms. Ashton when she was explaining her amendment, but I'm still puzzled because she said that the Leader of the Official Opposition thanked and encouraged. Well, was she there? Does she have proof? Did someone hear something? Because when we talk about such elements, we are here again, once again, faced with a motion that's based on hearsay. So we cannot really move stuff like this forward if it's based on hearsay. If Ms. Ashton was close to the Leader of the Opposition who was saying stuff like this, then I'd be ready to listen and entertain this kind of an amendment. But otherwise, it makes no sense. I mean, we would need to go back and do research and dig into the history going back 150 years of all the MPs in this House that have come before this House. So, I mean, maybe conversations could be had, but if Ms. Ashton is putting this forward, she should be providing evidence as well. So, as a legislator, this is just pure partisanship, and it's unfortunate and it's sad. It's really serious, Madam Chair, because if you think that we're going to let this go, I mean, we have to pay particular attention to this. I mean, we could all be accused of having spoken to someone at some point in time, and this really can impact every MP in this House, and we would need to go years and years back and come up with hundreds and hundreds of amendments, and we can assure that we will do that.
And then Mr. Coutu.
So I think there was a fair bit of media at the end of April talking about the specific meeting in question. So I would encourage Monsieur Gourde to do a cursory Google search on that front. And the particular one of the particular instances that's being referred to is, I believe, took place in New Brunswick. But I just want to quote here from a CBC story that talked about how, according to RCMP documents tabled at the Emergencies Act inquiry last year, the National Police Force believes that Diagolon, the group that these folks support, is a militia-like network whose supporters subscribe to an accelerationist ideology, the idea that a civil war or the collapse of Western governments is inevitable and ought to be sped up. I mean, that's deeply concerning. And the idea that the leader of the official opposition, who aspires to be prime minister, met with people who support such an entity is also deeply disturbing. I am disappointed to hear that there doesn't seem to be support for the amendment I've put out condemning the leader of the official opposition for meeting with supporters of such an organization, of a far-right organization. I would ask that we go to a vote, and I certainly look forward to passing the motion on a study on the rise of the far right in Canada, which is, I believe, is an incredibly important issue.
Mr. Coteau.
Yeah, I just move that we go into the vote if possible now.
All right.
So, and
Unless there are people who want to speak. Mr. Coteau, if there's someone else wishing to speak,
I think we can vote on
I have
that
to
at any
allow them
time.
to. No, I'm sorry. That's not how it works, Mr. Coteau. Mr. Wall and then Mr.
Okay,
Gord.
then I'm going to take my time then, if that's possible.
All right, take your time.
Madame la Présidente, rappel au règlement.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Seem, from my own perspective, that this is not going to end.
Madame la
So
Présidente.
I would ask the witnesses, please, Ms. Cadot and Ms. Mondu, thank you very much for coming, for your patience in listening to this. And hopefully we can get to speak to you again sometime. Thank you very much for coming and for your time.
Rappel au règlement.
Mr.
Point of order.
Un rappel au
You have a
règlement.
point of order?
Oui.
Yeah, okay.
Juste une question de clarification.
Just to clarify, Madam Chair, Mr. Coteau, it was his turn to speak, and he asked that we vote to adjourn debate on the amendment. Just to really understand the procedure, I think that is in order. He can ask for adjournment, and he can ask that we vote on this amendment. Maybe I misunderstood. I'm just seeking guidance on this.
Yesterday, if you saw in the House, the Speaker ruled on the idea that you cannot go to a vote unless there is no one else wishing to speak on the committee. I have two names here of people who wish to speak. So I'm sorry we cannot go to a vote yet, according to the Speaker's ruling. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Coteau, speak.
It's sometimes confusing because in my other committee, we were allowed to do
Mr.
that.
Coteau, I've just ruled. Would you like to speak,
No,
please?
I am speaking, yeah.
And the
That's
Speaker
okay if I
ruled
can
yesterday
speak?
in the House,
Yeah.
if you were there.
Is it
Go
okay
ahead.
if I speak, Madam Chair?
Mhm.
So I just want to support my colleague, Mr. Noor Mohammed, in the sense that I won't support the amendment mainly because I
You
think
will?
that
Did you say you will
I will
support?
not support the
Oh, all right,
amendment.
okay.
The reason why is that I think this, the way it's written, we can talk about many different issues. It really speaks to an issue around the growth of the far right in Canada. You know, in the United States, I keep seeing, more images of people marching, in Washington, far right extremists, white supremacists. You start to see more things like I go through my social media now, and I start to see more and more images of extremism in America, but also in Canada. And I think that I think all of us would agree here, every single person in this room. I hope so. That extremism usually occurs sometimes, usually in hidden places, in places we don't often see. It's a very underground movement, and I think we need to put some light, to shed some light on this, this growth that's taking place in the country, and to prove that it actually is growing, to figure out, bring in some experts to figure out what's actually happening right now at this moment.
To the amendment, Mr. Coteau, or to the motion itself?
Well, I was just saying why I don't support the amendment.
all right.
It's because I think the motion itself is clear enough. That's what I was trying to get
Okay,
at.
all right.
I'll just stop there, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Waugh and then Mr. Good.
Madam Chair, I was just going to do a privilege motion that I move that the chair actually violated the privileges of the members of this committee when the chair arbitrarily gave the floor to Mr. Cotto when we first started from the May 9th. It should have been Mr. Noor Mohammed, so that would be a privilege motion I'd like to move.
All right, go ahead.
I just did.
I do not think I did violate the privilege of anyone, actually. We had suspended, if you recall, Mr. Wall, so that the committee was not meeting at the moment. And, sorry, Mr. Albus?
Yes.
The committee was not meeting at the moment, and so we were looking to find out more about this motion
And then I
before
found it
you
for
allowed
you,
it.
right?
Well, okay, all right.
On May 9th,
Doesn't
we
matter who
found that
it.
Mr.
We
Noor
found
Mohammed.
it, that's not the point. The point is we found out that, in fact, Mr. Noor Mohammed's motion could not stand as it was, that we had to move a motion. Mr. Cotto moved that motion that the committee study it. That was pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Point of order, Mr. Albus.
Yes. Have you found his privilege motion to be in order?
I have not, but then you can challenge the chair if you wish.
Well, no, but I would like just to find out if you're going to be, because then we can have a discussion, because I would like to speak to that. Yeah, she's debating with the member.
Mr. Wall, I think I'm just, because this is quite a rare little thing we're doing here now, so I'm listening to the clerk. And I think why do you feel that your privilege was violated?
Well, I think when you look back, we found on May 9th, Madam Chair, that it was starting a debate with Mr. Noor Mohammed. And instead of him picking up where we left off on May 9th, Mr. Cotto tried to, you gave him the floor first when it really should have been Mr. Noor Mohammed. So
but
that would
Mr.
be
Noor Mohammed's hand was not up for the floor.
Yeah, but it should have gone back to him from the...
Not necessarily, because I got instructions from the clerk that, yes, Mr. Albus, I'm explaining something to Mr. Wall. Do you mind? Go ahead.
Chair, with all due respect, we do have standing motions in every committee. There's clearly pointed out that each party gets a rotation and how much time they get. The person that had the floor was Mr. Noor Mohammed. He made a motion that was not in order. You've admitted as much.
Yes.
And you somehow then went to Mr. Cotto, which is outside of the standing motions for the order of questioning. We should have gone from whoever should have followed Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Well, I'm sorry. There was nobody to follow Mr. Noor Mohammed. Mr. Cotto was a hand that came up to the, no, because we had finished, the minister had left. That part of the meeting was over. Mr. Noor Mohammed was asking the minister a question, and in the middle of that question, or the end of it, he moved his motion.
Which was not in order.
But we did not know that, Mr. Albus. We were looking to find out. The chair had told me it was archived.
The business of the meeting.
We were searching for it. So we did not do anything until we found out for sure. When we found out that the motion had been discussed at some point in time, therefore the clerk said, I had to therefore entertain a motion by anyone that we consider this motion on the committee. I did that. The committee voted and voted to consider the motion. That was all in order. That was in order of procedure. So this was nothing violated right now. I am speaking to Mr. Wall about how he felt his privilege was violated as a member, and that's what we're discussing right now.
But my question is
Mr.
to the
Wall
clerk.
has the floor. You made a point of order, and I said it wasn't. Mr. Wall, go ahead. You have the floor.
No, thank you a lot, Madam Chair. You know, we're just moving the privilege motion here. Now, these motions, as you know, trigger a debate, and it supersedes all other committee business, including the far-right motion that we're currently discussing.
So I've asked you to explain why you feel, because you have the floor. Why do you feel your privilege was violated? And then we can continue to discuss it.
Well, we haven't debated this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I'm asking you that. Tell me why your privilege was violated. And there's Mr. Albus jumped in on a point of order.
That's fine.
You have the floor, Mr. Wall.
So it's in order.
So it's in order now?
You brought a motion forward
Yes,
that
a
you felt
privilege
that your
motion.
privilege was violated.
Yeah.
I asked you to speak to tell me why you moved that motion. Why was your privilege violated? You have the floor to speak.
Thank you
You've
very
always
much.
had the floor. Mr. Albus just chimed in and on a point of order while you were speaking. So let's hear you, Kevin. I'm
Well-
always ready to listen to you. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the committee, but, you know, I think it's part of a privilege motion that these motions, as you know, Madam Chair, they trigger a debate, and we haven't really had the debate. What we started, the motions of superseding all committee business, we talked about the far-right motion, and that's what we're currently debating. We haven't talked,
No, we're debating an amendment. Sorry, Mr. Wall.
and the amendment reads as such.
We haven't voted on the amendment yet. So we're still actually debating the amendment and not the motion.
Yeah, go ahead.
Again,
Yes, Mr. Albus.
moving to a discussion about the amendment, can I ask you to maybe caucus with the
No,
clerk?
I-
And whether or not we are discussing his order?
Yes,
for
we
his-
are. And Mr. Waugh made a statement that we're discussing the motion, and I said, no, we were discussing the amendment. I answered Mr. Waugh's question, Mr. Albus.
Then why-
Mr. Waugh still has the floor, speaking to his motion.
Okay, it seems you're debating him
I'm
rather
not.
than letting him
I am
speak to his
answering
colleagues.
his questions. He's asked a question, and he said basically that we are discussing the motion, and I said no, we were just correcting him. We were in the moment discussing Miss Nikki's amendment, and we hadn't finished that. It hadn't come to a vote. Mr. Waugh brought a point of privilege, which I thought superseded everything. That's why I went to him, and we left Miss Nikki's motion to be debated later on because Mr. Waugh had precedence. And that's what I just did. Now, if you have a problem with that, I would like to hear it.
Again,
Mr. Waugh
Point
does
of
not
order,
have
Madam
the floor.
Chair.
I've never seen a chair debate with a member.
I'm
It's
not
either in
debating.
order and he can have the floor, or it's not
It's
in
out of
order.
order.
So it seems
I'm not debating him. He made a statement that and I said we're not discussing the motion. When we left off, when Mr. Waugh made his point of privilege, I said we had been discussing. I was just saying that we had been. That is a fact. That is what is on the table.
Okay, I'd like to be able to speak after he's done.
So point of order, Madam
Absolutely.
Chair.
Yes.
Sorry. I just
Sorry,
want.
a point of order. Okay.
Yes. Has the chair? My understanding is that the motion, the motion of privilege, is inadmissible. But I'm just wondering, have you ruled it to be an admissible point of privilege? I mean, is it admissible or not? I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
I would like to hear why Mr. Waugh felt his privilege was violated. I can't rule unless I hear he has a compelling reason to say that his privilege was violated. And I'm trying to get to that, except we keep having points of order and not letting Mr. Waugh speak. Mr. Waugh, will you continue, please?
I will say this, Madam Chair, thank you, because you acknowledge Mr. Cotto really shouldn't have had the floor. Well, he probably shouldn't have had the floor because
Well, you think you probably know.
Right? You should have had the floor from May 9th.
Point? So do I go back? Do we
From
rewind
May
back
9th.
to there, and I would do the same thing?
This is not what we're discussing, Kevin. Come on. Tell me about your
No,
point of
that's
privilege.
it. I just wanted to bring this up. I just thought,
Stop them and make a ruling and let's vote.
Sorry, I think I have enough information now from Mr. Waugh. He said he didn't have anything further to say, so I will rule, Mr. Waugh, that I don't consider this to be a point of privilege. I'm sorry, I'm ruling, and now I would like to hear what everyone has to say about my ruling. It's not a point of privilege, so there's not going to be no debate on it, but you can all tell me if you agree with my ruling or not. That's what you're supposed to do. Yes, Mr. Lightbar?
Madam Chair, I would never dare to question the ruling of the chair, but I think we're now, if you've ruled it out of order and irreceivable, Mr. Watt's point, now I think we're back on the sub-amendment, aren't we? Thank you. And if there are no more speakers, we can...
No, because it's out of order, so Mr. Albus cannot debate it. Are you debating Ms. Ashton's amendment, Mr. Albus?
No.
Well, that's what's on the floor now, I'm sorry.
Well, I didn't raise my hand on her motion.
Ms. Albus, sorry. I'm looking at my list here. Okay. Yeah. No. All right, we have no one else further to debate this unless you want to.
No, I was going to move to a vote on
And
it.
I think because we are in the middle of what
I have my
Mr.
hand up.
Gourd,
I have
you
my
were
hand up.
trying to say something? What were you trying to say?
Non, une motion pour closer la...
A motion to adjourn the meeting.
To suspend this meeting? Thank you. Adjourn, you want to adjourn?
Suspend.
Move to adjourn.
Suspend.
Okay, thank you.
Adjourned.
Okay.